Jai Shri Mataji. Srimad Devi Bhagavat. If you want to know who Adi Shakti is, read Devi Bhagavat, said by Her Holiness Shri Mataji Nirmala Devi.
Sankalpam Mama Atmanaha Sahajayogi Kutumbanam Atmonnati Prityartham Moksha Prapti Prityartham Sakshat Shri Adi Shakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devyai Pujanam Kariche. The Holy Recital of Srimad Devi Bhagavat.
Chapter 2, Episode 1 to 2, The Birth of Satyavati. The Rishi said, Sutji, there seems to be a mystery in your narration, and we are confused. First of all, while Satyavati was an unwed maiden in her father's house, how could she give birth to Vyasji? Secondly, why did King Shantanu marry her after that? You are a dharmic person. Please unravel these mysteries and tell us in detail. Sutji says, I prostrate in worship to that Supreme Adi Shakti Devi from whom human beings have received the gift of existence. Human beings have 4 pursuits: virtue, wealth, sense pleasures and salvation. Salutations to Adi Shakti. I will now relate to you the incidents related to this most sacred of Puranas. The most amazing fact is that if by chance the sounds of the most eloquent Bija Mantra of Devi Jagadambika come out of a being's mouth, he becomes eligible to receive her grace and blessings. Therefore, it should become the first priority of every being to utter the mantra and meditate on Bhagavati Jagadambika. She is always eager to bestow blessings and benevolence on anyone who worships her. There was a virtuous and pious king named Uparichar. He ruled over the kingdom of Chedidesh. He was very prosperous. He respected the Brahmins. He had worshipped Indra, and the god of the Devas had given him a precious crystal chariot. King Uparichar would mount his divine chariot and roam the skies unhindered and according to his will. The chariot never touched the ground. Daily, he performed religious and charitable deeds. His fame spread far and wide. He had a beautiful queen called Girika. They had 5 sons who were strong and noble-spirited. One day, the king wished to spend time with his queen, but he was directed by his elders to join a hunting expedition. He went, but his attention was all the time on his wife. His seed spilled. He wrapped it in a banyan leaf and requested a passing falcon to deliver the package safely to his queen. The bird picked up the leaf package and flew into the sky. Another falcon saw him and thought he was carrying his prey. He challenged him in the sky, and in the tussle that ensued, the package fell into the waters of the river Yamuna. Around that time, an Apsara called Adrika was bathing and splashing playfully in the river Yamuna. She dived into the water and caught the feet of a Brahmin who had just bathed and was performing evening prayers, Sandhya. He became angry and cursed the playful Apsara. May you turn into a fish for disturbing and defiling my meditation. She immediately turned into a fish and roamed the waters of the Yamuna. The packet that the falcon dropped fell near her and she immediately consumed it. After 10 months, the same fish was caught in a fisherman's net. When he cut open the stomach of the fish, he found to his utter surprise 2 human babies. One was a boy child and the other a beautiful baby girl. The fisherman took the infants and gave them to the king. The king kept the boy and gave the girl to the fisherman. The boy grew up to be a valiant and virtuous and became King Matsya. The girl was brought up by the fisherman. As her body always emitted the odor of fish, she got the name Matsya Gandha. The rishis asked, after the Apsara became a fish and got caught by the fisherman who cut open her stomach, What happened to Adrika? Did she die? And did the fisher folk eat her up? How did she get released from the curse? And did she go back to heaven? Please do tell us. Suji says, hearing the curse of the Muni, the Apsara became very forlorn and distressed. She wept and fell at the feet of the Brahmin. He was a compassionate person. He said, don't despair. In anger, I put a curse on you. But I will tell you how you will be released from it. You will become a fish and you will bear 2 human babies. After this, you will get your release. And that is exactly what happened. As soon as the babies were taken out of the fish, the soul discarded the body of a fish. It assumed the form of Apsara Adrika and went back to heaven. This is how girl Matsyagandha was born. She lived in the fisherman's house and grew into a beautiful maiden. The fisherman was also head boatman and she helped him in his work. Suji says, one day, the most pious, the most magnificent, and the most glorious ascetic, Muni Parasharji, was on a pilgrimage of holy places. He arrived on the banks of the sacred river Yamuna. He said to the boatman, take me across the river to the opposite bank. The boatman was eating his food, so he instructed his beautiful daughter Matsyagandha thus, daughter, you are very capable and clever. This honorable and holy saint wishes to go to the opposite bank. You can take him in the boat across the river. As per her father's wishes, the maiden Matsyagandha began to row the holy saint across the river. While they were still on the river, Parasharji felt stirrings within himself, and he took Matsyagandha's hand in his. She looked at him and said, you belong to a foremost clan. You are a Brahmin by caste. You are learned in the Vedas. You have performed penance and meditation. Am I equal or suitable to you? You are from the line of Guru Vashisht. You are well born and of noble descent. You are virtuous and righteous. You have full knowledge of the dharmas. Then why do you desire me? O twice born, to be born a human being is a unique gift. But I think that to be born into a Brahmin clan is the rarest gift of all. O great and glorious Brahmin, you possess the highest blessings of birth, natural disposition, virtues, knowledge of the Vedas, and all the gracious qualities. My body constantly emits the odor of fish. How could any feelings or desires be awakened by me? In her mind she thought, truly this Brahmin is a very simple-minded person. But I am all alone and there is no one to help me to divert his attention. So she said to him, be patient. In a little while we will reach the other bank. As soon as they reached, she said, O great saint, I am unfortunate that I smell bad. When 2 beings are of the same quality, then only there is happiness in union. No sooner had she said this, Saint Parasharji used his yogi's powers and caused her body to emit the perfume of musk. Perfume of her body spread for miles around. Then Matsyagandha became Satyavati of auspicious perfume. She said to Parasharji, it is daylight. People are watching. My father is across the river on the other bank. It is not right to behave like animals. We must wait for nightfall. This is the code of conduct written in the holy books. Please control your desires. Otherwise, there will be widespread and insufferable censure, slander, and defamation. Hearing this condition, Parasharji used his powers to cause a heavy fog. The bank was enveloped in darkness. Satyavati said, O Holy One, I am a chaste and pure maiden. You will leave as per your wishes, but what will happen to me? If I beget a child, what will I tell my father? Be kind and tell me what I must do in such a situation. Parasharji said, even after fulfilling my purpose, your chastity and purity will be intact. Ask for any boon that is dear to your heart. Satyavati said, O gracious and righteous one, you have bestowed an honor on me. Please grant that my father and mother never learn of this incident. May I have a son as magnificent and glorious as you, and may this perfume remain with me forever. Parasharji said, O beautiful maiden, Your son will be a partial incarnation of Lord Vishnu. His fame will spread over the three worlds. It is due to some hidden, preordained cause that I behaved in this manner. Before this, I have never been attracted to any woman. Many apsaras tried to tempt me, but I never felt any urges. I was always in detached state of mind. So you can definitely assume that there is some divine purpose in this. Your son will understand the Vedas and compile them into 4 parts. He will be honored and venerated in all the 3 worlds. Sudji says, Satyavati was very gratified and pleased to hear this. Parasharji bathed in the holy Yamuna and left. Satyavati returned to her parents. She was with child. When the time drew near, she went to an island in the river Yamuna and gave birth to a son. He was radiant like the sun. As soon as he was born, he turned into a man. He said to his mother, "O sweet mother, I am full of strength and energy. I had completely engaged myself in meditation before I appeared in your womb. You may leave me here and return home. I also will find a place and settle down in prayer and meditation. Whenever you put your attention on me, I will come into your presence. At any time, if you are faced with difficulties, just think of me and I will be there to help you. May you always be blessed. It is getting late and I must leave. Go and spend your time in joy and peace." Then Vyasji left and Satyavati returned to her parents. Thus, by the grace of the most holy Parasharji, Vedavyas was born. He was a partial incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Being aware that Kaliyam had begun, Vedavyas divided the Vedas into different parts. For this reason, he got the title Ved Vyas. He wrote all the Purans and the great epic Mahabharata. He taught the Vedas in all its details to great sages including his son Sukadevji. Sudji says, "O Munis, this is the story of the births of Satyavati and Vedavyas. It is not proper to review or criticize the conduct and actions of men of God, nor it is right to imitate those actions. We should only try to absorb their qualities and awaken their virtues within ourselves. There is always a hidden reason behind apparent strange behavior of incarnations and holy saints. In this case, the cause was the entry of Vedavyas into this world. I have narrated this strange and amazing episode to you. It will not have an adverse effect on the listener. He will be forever peaceful." Chapter 2, Episode 3 to 4. The story of Mahabhish and Ganga, the birth of Shantanu, marriage of Shantanu with Ganga, and the birth of the Vasus, and the birth of Bhishma. The Rishi said, "O blessed one, you have told us about Satyavati and Vedavyas, but one part of our request is still pending. How did Satyavati, who was Vyasji's mother, become the queen of Raja Shantanu? She was just a boatman's daughter. Also, she was not very beautiful and the odor of fish always surrounded her. How then did Shantanu, descendant of Puru and a powerful and illustrious king, accept her as his queen? Who was Raja Shantanu's first queen who gave birth to Bhishma, and why is Bhishma called a part of the Vasus? O wise Sudji, You have already told us that Bhishma was very glorious and magnificent and was endowed with great strength. He gave his father's throne to Satyavati's son Chitrangat, and on Chitrangan's death, he coronated the younger prince Vichitravirya. Bhishma was the eldest son of Raja Shantanu and should have had first claim to the throne. How did the youngest son become king? He was not insensitive to this fact that his eldest brother is the rightful king. Also, after Vichitravirya's death, why did the grieving Satyavati insist on the widowed queen's bearing sons? Why did she not have Bhishma crowned king? Why did the valiant Bhishma never get married? O learned Surji, you are the learned pupil of Vyasji. It should not be difficult for you to answer all our questions. We have renounced everything to assemble in this sacred grove and listen to your words of wisdom. Surji says, there was a king named Mahabhish belonging to the Ikshvak dynasty. He was a very truthful, dharmic and universal being. He had performed 1000 Ashwamedhas or sacrifices and 100 Vajpaya Yagyas, the last of the 5 Skrauta sacrifices enjoined in the Vedas, and impressed the king of the gods Indra. As a boon, he was ensured free passage to heaven. One day, King Mahabhish went to the abode of Sri Brahma. All the gods were in attendance on Sri Brahma. The holy river Ganga was also present. A strong gust of wind disturbed Ganga's raiments. All the gods present avoided looking at her and bowed their heads. But King Mahabhish fixed his gaze on her, and she also slanted glances at him. They felt attracted to each other. Seeing this, Sri Brahma became angry. He put a curse. King, you are banished from heaven. Go and take birth as a mortal. After you perform enough virtuous actions, you will again merit access to heaven. For her misconduct, Ganga was also given the same curse. King Mahabhish and Ganga were very dejected and left Brahmaji's abode. The king began to review all the royal households in the mortal world and finally decided to take birth in the house of Raja Pratip of the line Puru. At this same time, the 8 Vasus, accompanied by their wives, had come to Guru Vashisht ashram. There they had full freedom to go anywhere at will and enjoy the beautiful surroundings. The chief of the Vasus was Dhyo. His wife saw the sacred cow Nandini and asked her husband, "To who does this cow belong?" He replied, "O fair one, this cow belongs to Vashishthaji. If any man or woman is fortunate enough to drink her milk, he or she will live for 10,000 years and remain ever young." His wife said, "I have a friend who lives in the mortal world. She is the daughter of Raj Rishi Ushinar, a sage who was previously from a royal family or a Kshatriya. She is very beautiful. Please let us take this wonderful cow, which gives an unending supply of milk, together with her calf to our ashram. We will keep her there till my friend gets the opportunity to drink this most auspicious and life-giving milk. Then my friend will be unique among mortals. She will never grow old and will not have to bear ill health." Even though Vasudhyo did not have any bad intentions, he still acceded to his wife's request and committed the grievous sin of dishonoring his host Sri Vashisht. He stole the cow, and all the other Vasus became accomplices in this despicable act. After the cow was taken away, Guru Vashisht returned to his ashram after collecting fruits and flowers. His attention turned towards the cow, and he noticed that both the cow and the calf were missing. He began to search in the caves and in the forest. When he did not find them anywhere, he went into meditation and came to know of the grave and dishonest act committed by the Vasus. He uttered aloud, "For this sin of stealing, all the Vasus will have to take birth in this mortal world, and there shall be no doubt in this." Such was the curse pronounced on the Vasus by Guru Vashisht. Hearing this, the Vasus were very distressed. They immediately went to Vashishtji, fell at his feet and tried to appease him. Seeing their pitiable condition, the sage, who was most compassionate, mitigated the curse. "All of you will be released from the curse after a year. but the Vasu who took the sacred cow Nandini will have to remain in the mortal world for many years. After being sentenced, the Vasus saw Ganga, the most supreme of all rivers, walking on the road. She was also very sad and dejected. The Vasus respectfully greeted her and said, Devi, how will we, whose nourishment is only nectar and ambrosia, survive in the mortal world? It is very upsetting and disturbing to think that we have to be born as mortals. O Devi, we humbly request you to take human form and give birth to us. O auspicious one, there is a holy and pious king Shantanu. Please marry him. As in when you give birth to each of us, you may throw us into the water. Devi Ganga agreed. The Vasus left, Ganga also left. But she kept thinking about this promise that she had given. At about the same time, Mahabhish took birth in the royal household of King Pratip. He was given the name Shantanu. The prince grew up to be brave and valiant, righteous and pious. When his father, King Pratip, performed singing of praises and prayers to Surya, he received as a reward a beautiful maiden. This maiden came out of the water and sat on the lap of King Pratip. The king asked her, O beautiful maiden, without taking my permission, you have seated yourself on my holy right lap. What is your desire? The girl replied, O king, you belong to the noble lineage of Kuru. I wish you to marry me. That is why I have sat upon your lap. The king said, That is not possible. The place that you have occupied on my right lap is reserved for my daughters or daughters-in-law. Therefore, O auspicious one, you may become my daughter-in-law. By your auspicious presence, I am sure I will beget a glorious and righteous son. You may marry him. The maiden accepted and left. The king kept thinking of the maiden in the forest as he returned home. Later, when his son Shantanu grew to manhood, the king related this incident to him. Then he directed his son to go to the forest, and if he met this beautiful maiden, and she expressed a wish to marry him, he should not question her. He should marry her, and this would bring him lasting joy and peace. Sudji says, after giving his son all the necessary education, knowledge and instructions, he handed over the reins of government to his son and retired to the forest to pass the rest of his days in prayer and meditation and singing the praises of Bhagavati Jagadambika. Finally, he discarded his body and became entitled to a place in heaven. Then the full responsibility of looking after the kingdom fell to Shantanu. He became monarch of the whole world. During his kingship, all proceedings of the kingdom were conducted in an honest, righteous, and fair manner. He looked after all the needs of his subjects. Sudji says, one day, King Shantanu went hunting in the forest along the banks of the river Ganga. He got a glimpse of a beautiful maiden wearing radiant garments and sparkling jewels. He was enchanted by this sight. He thought, this must be the maiden my father spoke about. This is more than a maiden. She seems like the goddess Lakshmi in tangible form. He looked at her without blinking and could not remove his gaze from her. He was perplexed. The maiden also felt that this was the king Mahabhish in his new incarnation. She was filled with affection and she came and stood before him. The king was also filled with affection and spoke in a soft manner. O beautiful and elegant maiden, what are you? A Devi, a human, a Gandharvi, a Yakshasni, a Nagakanya, or an Apsara? You have a very pleasing appearance. O radiant one, whoever you are, I request you to agree to become my queen. Sudji says, Raja Shantanu did not know that this was Ganga herself, but she knew that he was King Mahabhish, who was now King Shantanu. Remembering their previous attraction towards each other, she smiled and said, O great king, you are the son of King Pratip. I am aware of who you are. Which maiden would be so foolish as to refuse the offer of marriage to you? But there is a condition. Once you promise to keep that, I will marry you. Whatever actions I do, whether right or wrong, You must not use your position to prevent me. You must also not scold me or use harsh words. You are the most supreme monarch, but if you ever break this condition, I will have to leave you and go far away. The Vasus had already got a promise from Ganga. Also, being aware of King Mahabhish's love for her, she decided on this strategy for her present human form. King Shantanu accepted the condition and gave a solemn promise. Gangaji married him. She became the queen of the world's most powerful and virtuous king. They lived happily in the palace and the surrounding gardens. Then, Gangaji gave birth to a boy child who was actually a Vasu. She immediately threw the child into the waters of the river Ganga. She repeated this each time a baby was born. After she had thrown 7 boy babies, the king became anxious. He began to wonder how to preserve the dynasty and posterity. Could it be that his wife was something evil in disguise, as she had already drowned 7 children? He was afraid to interfere, as then she would leave him and go away. She was now due to have her 8th child. He somehow felt that this child was special and he did not know if he would have any more sons in the future. After much deliberation, he decided in the interest of the dynasty to exercise his authority as king. The 8th child was the Vasu chief Dhyo, who had stolen the cow Nandini from Guru Vasisht. When the child was born, Shantanu stood before her and pleaded, "O most delicate one, you have a holy radiance in your face. I am your servant. My prayer to you is, please give the boon of life to this child. I will care for it. You have already killed 7 sons of mine. Save this 8th child. For this reason, my head is bowed before you. You may ask for anything else, and however impossible it may seem, I will give it to you. But please understand that I have to preserve my lineage. Those who are learned in the Vedas have said that a man who has no child is unfortunate and does not find a place in the heaven. So please let this 8th son of mine live." In spite of king's pleas, Ganga took the child and went towards the river. The king exclaimed, "O evil and sinful woman, have you no fear of hell? If you wish, you may stay or you may leave. But let this child remain here. You are trying to destroy our clan. I can have nothing to do with you." Ganga said, "O king, it was also my wish to keep this child alive, but you have broken your promise. Therefore, I cannot stay here. But know this, I am Ganga. I had come on this earth to help the Devas complete an undertaking. A long time ago, Guru Vasisht had cursed the Vasus and banished them to the mortal world. They were very distressed, and at the time they met me. They requested me to give them a human birth. To accomplish this, I married you. Please believe me. It was those same 7 Vasus who took birth through me. Now they are released from the curse. This last Vasu will remain as your son for some time. I give him to you. Enjoy him as your son. He will be known as Gangeya and will have unequal strength and valor. I will take him to the same place where I met you. I will nourish him till he is grown up, and then I will return him to you. Because, O king, without a mother, a child cannot grow or be happy." Saying this, Ganga took the child and vanished. King Shantanu remained in his palace. He was in deep sorrow. The disappearance of his wife and son gave him endless grief. He ruled the kingdom, but the clouds of despair always hovered over him. Many years passed. One day, King Shantanu went into the forest to hunt. Gradually, he reached the bank of the river Ganga. He noticed there was very little water in the river. He was amazed. He spotted a young boy playing in the sand. He had an enormous bow and he was shooting arrows from it. King Shantanu was astonished. He could not realize who this boy was. He could only stand and admire the great strength and accuracy with which the boy was wielding the bow. He spoke to the boy, "O most pure child, whose son are you?" The boy was engrossed in the bow and arrow and made no reply. In a few moments, he vanished. The king was stunned. It suddenly dawned on him that this might be his own son. But now, what to do and where to go? He calmed himself down and sat on the banks and began to sing the praises of Devi Ganga. The Ganga appeared to him in the same radiant form that he had first seen her. He said, "O Gange, who is this child that I just saw? Please show him to me." Ganga said, "Rajendra, he is your son. I have looked after him up to now. He is the eighth Vasu. I am handing him to you. He will be a great ascetic and will be known by the name Gangeya. He will be unshakable in his meditation and religious pursuits. I have instilled in him the knowledge of the Vedas and the art and science of archery. He has complete knowledge of everything. He is well versed in interpretation, significance, and discretion. He is most holy and pure. Whatever Guru Vashisht knows, this boy has already imbibed. You are a great and famous king. Take him and experience the joy of being his father." She brought the boy and gave him to Shantanu, then she vanished. The king's face shone with delight and he was experiencing great happiness. He made the boy sit on his lap and kissed his head. Then he put him in his chariot and drove towards his palace. On reaching Hastinapur, he celebrated his son's arrival with pomp and grandeur. He consulted priests and astrologers for an auspicious date. All the subjects and ministers were invited, and in their presence he anointed Ganganandan Bhishma as crown prince and heir to the throne. King Shantanu was completely satisfied. Thoughts of Ganga left his mind forever. Surji said, "O Munis, I have told you all the details of the birth of Bhishma and Ganga's sojourn on this earth. This entire episode took place because of the curse on the Vasus. Whoever listens to this story gets all his sins washed away. There is no doubt in this. This narration is very holy, auspicious, and filled with divine principles of the Vedas. I have told it to you exactly as it was told it to me by the great Ved Vyasji." Chapter 2, Episodes 5 to 6. Bhishma's vow, marriage of Satyavati to Raja Shantanu, birth of the Kauravas and Pandavas. The Rishi said, "O sage with the long hair, you have answered all our queries regarding the curse on the Vasus and them taking human birth, and also regarding the birth of Bhishma. O learned one, who is conversant with religious duties and customs, kindly tell us how King Shantanu got married to Satyavati, mother of Vedavyas, and who was chaste and from whose body auspicious fragrance emitted. Shantanu was the most supreme monarch and she was brought up in a boatman's house. What was the reason that made him offer her marriage? Please enlighten us on this." Surji said, King Shantanu was very fond of hunting. He roamed the forest for 4 years. He was always accompanied by Prince Bhishma. He enjoyed his son's company in the same way that Sri Shiva enjoyed the company of Kartikeya. One day, while hunting, he reached the bank of the holy river Yamuna. He suddenly got a fragrance from an unknown source. He tried to locate it. He thought even the flowers of Parijat, Kasturi, Champa, Malati and Kevra do not emit such a perfume. From where has the breeze wafted this fragrance? He began to wander here and there and tried to follow the breeze. When he reached the bank of the river, he saw a beautiful maiden sitting there. She had decorated herself and was wearing smoky, misty garments. He was surprised to see such a beauty of face and limb. The whole place was filled with this most excellent fragrance. He was fascinated and wondered if she was a goddess, a human, a Gandharva, or a Nagakanya. He spoke thus to the maiden: "Who are you? Who is your father? From where have you come? Is there anyone else with you? Please tell me. Are you married or not? What are your dreams and desires? Please give me information about yourself." The lotus-eyed maiden smiled and said, "O king, know this. I am the daughter of the head boatman. My father asked me to sit here. I row a boat on these waters. This is our occupation. My father has just gone home. This is the truth." The king said, "I am a king of the Kuru clan, O doe-eyed maiden. There is no woman in my house. You please grace the position of being my wife. I will be favorable towards you. My wife has left, and since then I have not married." The king spoke in humble and sweet tones. Satyavati, who was chaste and pure and full of sattvic qualities, got courage and felt calm. She said, "I accept all the praises you have spoken about me. Whatever you desire should happen, but I am not free to make my own decisions. My father can give permission. You may please meet him and place your proposal before him. I am not a woman of loose morals. I am the daughter of a chief. I only obey his commands. If he agrees, we can get married, but we must observe the rules of our clan." Suji says, accordingly, King Shantanu went to the boatman's house with his offer of marriage. When the boatman saw him coming, he was surprised. He offered salutations to the king and said, "I am greatly honored that you have stepped into my house. Please command me, what can I do for you?" The king said, "O noble one, if it is possible, please give your daughter in marriage to me. I speak the truth." The boatman said, "O king, if you are asking for this jewel of a daughter, I will certainly give her to you. A daughter is for giving away in marriage, and I cannot keep her forever. But, O king, there is one condition. The son born to this maiden will be the king after you. Under no condition must the throne go to any other sons of yours." Suji says, hearing the boatman's condition, the king was thrown into mental turmoil. He had already nominated Bhishma as heir to the throne. So, without replying, he left the boatman's house and returned to the palace. He was very sad and dejected. He could neither eat nor sleep. Seeing his father in a despondent state, Prince Bhishma asked him, "Father, you are the king of kings. Which enemy is challenging you? I will this moment vanquish him. Please tell me the truth. Why are you so upset?" If a son cannot discover his father's cause for worry and cannot remove that sorrow, then it is better he was not born. In the clan of Raghu, the most pleasing personality, Sri Rama, came as the son of King Dashrath. As ordered by his father, he renounced the throne and went into the forest. Together with Sri Sita and Lakshman, he lived on Chitrakoot mountain. Raja Harishchandra's son Rohit fulfilled his father's wishes and got sold. He worked as a slave in a Brahman's house. "O king, this body of mine belongs to you. Tell me what I must do to help. Am I inauspicious? In my lifetime, I cannot see you sad or distressed. What is troubling you? I will take my bow and arrows and demolish it, even if I die in the process. It will justify my well-being. If I am successful, then you can derive honor and pleasure from it. The son who is either not willing or able to remove the cause of his father's sufferings is worthy of contempt, and his birth is a waste." Suji says, hearing all this, King Shantanu was ashamed. He immediately said, I am deeply worried that you are the only son I have. Of course, you are strong, brave, valiant, illustrious, and never retreat from danger. But still, for a king of my position, having only one son is not enough. If there is a war and you fall on the battlefield, I will be left without an heir and without support. Son, this is the cause for my concern. This is why I am sad. Sutji says, Bhishma called the trusted ministers and said, My father seems to be bashful. He is not telling me everything clearly. You please try to uncover the truth and let me know. I will immediately work towards removing all his troubles. The ministers approached King Shantanu and got the complete truth from him. They informed Bhishma. He immediately took some ministers and went to the head boatman's house. Bhishma said, O honorable chief, please give your auspicious daughter in marriage to my father. She will be my mother and I will always honor and protect her. The boatman said, O fortunate one, you are the prince. You marry this maiden. I say this because it is apparent that as long as you live, her son cannot be king. Bhishma said, She is my mother. I do not wish to rule the kingdom. I speak the truth. Only her son will inherit the throne. The boatman said, I accept that you are speaking the truth, but any son of yours can use his right and strength to wrest the throne from my grandson. This is possible. Bhishma said, I hereby take a solemn oath that I will never marry. This will forever be the truth. My vow is irreversible. Sutji says, Hearing this powerful oath, the boatman gave his most beautiful daughter Satyavati to King Shantanu. This is how King Shantanu married Satyavati. He never ever came to know that she had earlier given birth to Vedavyas. Sutji says, In this way, King Shantanu married Satyavati. They had two sons who died. Then by the favor of Vyasji, one widow of King Vichitravirya bore a son, but he was blind. He was called Dhritarashtra. This happened because the widow closed her eyes on beholding the lustrous Vedavyas. The second widow smeared her body with white sandal paste, and her son Pandu was afflicted with white skin. The third son of Vedavyas was born to a maiden servant. He was Vidur. Vidurji was dharmic, honest, truthful, and a most holy soul. Because of his blindness, Dhritarashtra was not made the king. Instead, the ministers placed Pandu on the throne. With the help of Bhishma, the most illustrious Pandu ruled the kingdom. The learned and intelligent Vidur was minister. Dhritarashtra had two wives. One was Gandhari, daughter of Subalraj. The other was Vaishya, daughter of a Vaishya. She managed the household affairs. Pandu, who was learned in the Vedas, had two wives. One was Kunti, daughter of Shursen. The other was Madri, born in the house of Madraj. Gandhari had 100 sons and Vaishya had a son. While Kunti was still a maiden in her father's house, she had a son by Surya called Karna. After this, she was married to Pandu. The rishis asked Sutji, O great Muni, what you have just told us is very curious and strange. That Kunti gave birth to her firstborn son and then only got married to Pandu. Please tell us how she begot Surya's son and still remained a maiden fit to marry King Pandu. Sutji says, O twice born souls, when Kunti was only 4 years old, Raja Kunti Bhoj asked for her from Shursen and brought her up as his own daughter. She was very beautiful. Ceremonies of offering oblations to the sacred fire were about to begin in the palace. Kunti had been instructed by Raja Kunti Bhoj to welcome the guests. It was the beginning of the rainy season and an auspicious hour of dawn. Sage Durvasa arrived. Kunti received him with all the prescribed formalities and respect. He was very pleased with the care and attention he received. He gave her a rare and precious mantra by which any of the gods could be invoked, and he would appear in person to fulfill a desire. After sage Durvasha left, Kunti went to her apartments and began to wonder how the mantra worked and which devata she would invite. At that time, Surya was enthroned in the skies. Kunti's gaze fell on him. She uttered the mantra and invited the brilliant and dazzling sun god. No sooner had she done this than the sun god assumed the form of a handsome youth and stood before her. She began to tremble with fear. Then the doe-eyed maiden bowed with folded hands and said, "Lord, I thank you for appearing thus before me. Now you may return to your heavenly seat." The sun god said, "Kunti, you have used the great mantra and invited me, but you do not even welcome me or offer me a seat. I am under obligation to the mantra." Kunti said, "O Deva, you have full knowledge of the dharmas. Nothing is hidden from you. I am still a maiden. I place my head at your holy feet." The god Surya said, "Kunti, if you do not receive me, I will lay a curse upon the person who gave you this mantra, and you also will not escape the wrath of the curse. O beautiful one, know this truth. Your maiden status will remain undisturbed. Ordinary mortals will be unaware of this event. You will give birth to a son as radiant and brilliant as I am." After fulfilling the purpose of the mantra, the sun god returned to his abode. Kunti was with child and remained confined to her rooms. Her foster parents never discovered her state. Only a midwife knew and helped her when her son was born. He was extremely beautiful and was endowed with 2 beautiful earrings and a coat of divine protection, Kavach. He appeared like a second Surya or like Lord Kartikeya. The nurse picked up the baby and assured Kunti of all assistance. Then Kunti laid the baby in a small basket and spoke to him in farewell. "My son, I am extremely sorry. There is no other alternative for me. You are dearer to me than life, and still I have to give you up. You are possessed of all auspicious qualities. I am most unfortunate that I have to part with you. Devi Katyayani is the mother of the universe. May that Devi Bhagavati nourish you with nectar and take care of you. Your tiny face is as pleasant and lovable as a lotus. When will I ever set eyes upon you again? You are the son of Surya. Maybe in my previous births I did not worship adequately the mother of the 3 worlds, Bhagavati Katyayani. I did not worship her lotus feet. For that reason, I did not merit a happy fate. After I surrender you, I will go into the forest and perform penance." Surji says, after hearing this, Kunti put the child into a basket and handed him over to the nurse. Then she waited in her father's house. The nurse had taken the child out of the gates when she met a Sooth, one who narrates ancient legends, named Adhirath. His wife Radha was also with him. They asked the nurse to give the child to them. They took him to their house and cared him. The child grew into the strong, powerful, and lustrous Karna. The maiden Kunti became the wife of Pandu. Pandu had one more wife, Madri, daughter of King Madraj. Once Pandu was out hunting, and by a terrible mistake, he caused the death of a Muni, saint. At that time, the Muni had assumed the form of a deer and was engrossed in play with his mate. King Pandu killed the female deer. The Muni was enraged and pronounced a curse on Pandu. If the king ever had relationship with a woman, he would instantly die. King Pandu was very repentant, but he also knew that a sage's curse always took effect. He became very sad, abdicated his throne, and left for the forest. Both his wives were very chaste and virtuous, and accompanied him into the forest to look after him. He built a small abode on the banks of the holy river Ganga, where many other sages and saints had their ashrams. He had the good fortune to listen to scriptures and other holy discourses. During one such discourse, he heard a heavenly voice: "A childless person has no access. He forfeits the right to enter heaven. Therefore, it is of utmost importance to acquire a son in any possible way. There are 11 categories of son: begotten by yourself, grandson, in the absence of the husband, a son begotten by another member of the clan, son born posthumously, even though husband may be living, child begotten by another, child who is already conceived before marriage and born in the husband's home, child born in secret to a maiden in her father's house, child who has been bought by paying money, foundling, child received as a gift, and child acquired from poor and distressed parents by giving money." But after the first category, the others are progressively considered vile, base, and wretched. When Pandu heard this, he repeated it to Kunti. Kunti told him about the boon she had received from sage Durvasha and assured him that the mantra worked and that she would be able to invite any god to help them. Pandu gave her permission to use the mantra. She invoked the god Dharma and was blessed to be the mother of Yudhishthir. The god Vayu blessed her with the son Bhim, and Lord Indra blessed her with son Arjuna. Seeing this, Madri also wanted a son. So Pandu requested Kunti to teach Madri the mantra. When Madri invoked the mantra, the twin gods Ashwini Kumars appeared and blessed her with 2 sons, Nakul and Sahadev. In this way, the Pandava clan got its 5 princes born in the forest. One day, the ashram was very quiet and calm. Pandu looked at Madri and was overcome with desire. Death hovered above. Madri tried her best to dissuade him, but to no avail. Pandu fell down lifeless. Madri began to weep inconsolably. Kunti and all the princes and munis made arrangements for the funeral. Madri performed sati by entering the funeral pyre. She had given her 2 sons, Nakul and Sahadev, to Kunti, keeping Dharma as witness. Kunti and the 5 princes were taken to Hastinapur. Bhishma, Vidur and Dhritarashtra came to console Kunti, as also many others had come. Since everyone was aware of the curse over Pandu, they wanted to know whose sons the princes were. Kunti replied, "These princes of the Kuru clan are the sons of the gods." To convince the people, Kunti prayed and invited the gods. They all appeared in the heavens and confirmed that the princes were verily their sons. Bhishma honored the princes, and together with the others, she began to live in Hastinapur. In this way, Kunti and her sons stayed in Hastinapur and were looked after by Bhishma. Chapter 2, Episodes 7 to 8. Short history of the Kauravas and Pandavas. The death of most of them in battle. Vyasji shows a glimpse of the dead relatives to Kunti, Gandhari and Uttara, the disappearance of Sri Krishna and Balram, Pandavas' journey to Himalayas, Parikshit's installation on the throne, and the curse of a Brahmin's son. Suji says, the most respectable Draupadi became the wife of the 5 Pandavas. She was a chaste and virtuous wife. She gave birth to 5 sons who were most beautiful. Arjun married Subhadra, sister of Sri Krishna, after carrying her away from a gathering with the consent of Sri Krishna. She gave birth to a great warrior, Abhimanyu, who died on the battlefield. Draupadi's 5 sons were also killed in battle. Abhimanyu had been married to the beautiful daughter of Raja Virat. The clan was almost wiped out. Abhimanyu's wife Uttara had given birth to a son. He had been wounded by Ashwadhama's fiery arrow and his body was burning. Sri Krishna saved the boy. He grew up to be Raja Parikshit. After his sons died in battle, Dhritarashtra was plunged into grief. He stayed with the Pandavas, but he was always distressed by Bhim's taunts. His queen Gandhari was herself overwhelmed with grief at the loss of her sons. Yudhishthira occupied himself in the service of the king and the queen. He requested Vidur to console and counsel them. Arjun also tried to comfort them. But Bhim could not control his anger and used every opportunity to say insulting words within the hearing of Dhritarashtra. But Arjun continued to pacify the old king. After living in that kingdom for 18 years, Dhritarashtra decided to leave for the forest. He asked Yudhishthira for money to perform the obsequies for his deceased sons. Yudhishthira had a meeting with all his brothers and decided to give some wealth to Dhritarashtra so that he could complete the formalities and customs. Bhim was furious and did not want anything to be done for the benefit of the souls of the wicked Duryodhan and others who had insulted Draupadi. After completing all the rites and offering money to the Brahmins, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari left for the forest. Kunti and Vidur accompanied them. Sanjay also decided to go. All the people went with them up to the banks of the river Ganga and returned very sad and in tears. Dhritarashtra and others who had accompanied them built an ashram on the banks of Ganga. They gained control of their senses and attention and settled down in meditation and prayer. After 6 years, Yudhishthira had a dream in which he saw his mother Kunti as very weak and frail. He suggested to his brothers that they should go to pay their respects to their mother and all the elders. They agreed, and even Subhadra, Draupadi, and Princess Uttara, together with civilians of the kingdom, left for the forest. There was a very happy reunion, but Yudhishthira noticed that Vidur was absent. On asking Dhritarashtra, he was told, Vidur is a totally detached soul. He has no desires, nor does he collect things. He must be sitting in a secluded spot, meditating on the eternal Sri Hari. The next morning, Yudhishthira found Vidur sitting in the shade of the deep forest. His body had become lean. King Yudhishthira said, O most and noble one, I bow my head at your lotus feet. But Vidur continued to sit immobile like a mound of earth. After a moment, a bright light emerged from his mouth and entered the mouth of Yudhishthira. They were both partial incarnations of Dharma. In this way, only the mortal body of Vidur remained. Yudhishthira was very sad and made preparations for the last rites. Just then, a voice was heard from heaven. King, this Vidur was a highly realized soul. It is not proper to cremate his body, just leave it and go. Hearing this, all the Pandavas bathed in the holy Ganga. They went to Dhritarashtra and told him all the details. At that time, all the Pandava clan and their subjects had gathered in the ashram. Satyavati Nandan Vyasji, Narada, and many other sages and saints had come to meet Yudhishthira. Kunti offered pranams to Vyasji and said, Dvaipayan, born on an island, I set eyes on my son Karan only the day he was born. O great ascetic, I am very sad. Please use your powers and let me have one glimpse of him. You are in every way capable and adequate. Please grant me this wish. Gandhari also requested him. O Holy One, I have never seen my sons, and all of them perished in battle. Please let me also see them just once. Subhadra said, Abhimanyu was a fearless warrior. I loved him more than my life. I crave for one more glimpse of him. Please make him appear before me. Suji says, upon hearing all these pleadings, Vyasji performed pranayam, process of restraining the breath, and meditated on the primordial mother Bhagavati Jagadambika. It was eventide. Vyasji called Yudhishthira and other Pandavas, and they took baths in the sacred waters of Bhagirathi. Then they began to sing the praises of the Devi. We worship that Devi in whom Sri Hari takes refuge, who is formless, who is endowed with attributes, who is Brahma Swarupini, of the form of creation, who is the creatrix of all the gods, that goddess who resides in Manidweep, Bhuvaneshwari. When there is nothing in existence, you alone exist. We bow our heads at your lotus feet. When there was no water, air, ether, their sounds, their essences, their characteristics, ego, senses, mind, intelligence, or sun and moon, then also you and you alone existed. O Bhagavati Jagadambike, I prostrate before you. O Almighty and Omniscient One, having ordained the entire creation, you become immersed in meditation until the final dissolution. There is no being, however wise or prudent, who can fully comprehend your independent, unrestrained, and all-pervading self. O Divine Mother, these people pray to me to show them their deceased relatives. Where do I have the power or adequacy to do this? Therefore, please grant them the vision of their relatives who are now in heaven. Suji says, when Vyasji made this prayer, the ever-compassionate mother recalled all the princes to appear before the assembled Pandavas and Gandhari. Everyone was filled with joy and emotional tears. Vyasji offered thanks to Devi Mahamaya for this illusory vision. The dead went back and the living returned to Hastinapur. Suji says, after this, on the third day, all of a sudden, the ashram caught fire and Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Kunti and others died. At that time, Sanjay had gone on a pilgrimage. Yudhishthira heard the news from Narad and was very sad. 36 years after the destruction of the Kauravas, the Yadava clan also perished. They began to fight within themselves, and this proved the curse of a Brahmin. Balram renounced his body. Sri Krishna was hit by the arrow of a hunter and disappeared. Sri Krishna was verily Sri Vishnu. To materialize a curse, he played out this drama. When Vasudev ji heard this unhappy news, he cleansed his mortal body and went into deep meditation on Devi Bhuvaneshwari and surrendered his spirit. Arjun was deeply grieved. He undertook a pilgrimage and performed all necessary ceremonies for the departed and purification by fire. The sea engulfed the kingdom of Sri Krishna. Arjun left the place, and on the way robbers and cowherds looted him of all his possessions. By then, even his prowess he had surrendered. He went to Indraprasth and installed Anirudh Kumar Vajranabh as king. He took permission for this from Vedavyas, who told him, when God reincarnates again on this earth, you will also accompany him in the same virtuous and illustrious form. Hearing these comforting words, Arjun left for Hastinapur, where he sadly related all news to Yudhishthira. King Yudhishthira decided to retire to the Himalayas. He crowned Parikshit as king and together with Draupadi and all his brothers left for the mountains. All 6 of them surrendered their mortal bodies and attained heaven. Parikshit was a dharmic king. He ruled for 60 years and prudently and attentively nurtured his subjects. One day, he went hunting in the deep dense forest. After chasing deer for a whole day, he was tired, hot and thirsty. Nearby, he spotted an ascetic. The sage was in deep meditation. The king, parched with thirst, requested the Muni for water. The Muni did not stir, nor did he reply. The already agitated king flew into a rage. He picked up a dead snake which was lying in front, and under the influence of Kali, temptation, he put the snake around the Muni's neck. Still his meditation was undisturbed. The king left the forest and returned to the palace. This Muni had a son who was a great ascetic named Gavijat. He had attained limitless powers. He was in the same forest with his friends. They told him, Muni Kumar, someone has just hung a dead snake around your father's neck. The Muni became furious. He took water in his cupped hands, and as he poured it on the earth, he pronounced a curse. Whoever has put a dead snake around my father's neck, that cruel person will be bitten by the venomous Takshak serpent on the 7th night. The king had already reached his palace. One of the Muni's Shishyas, students, went before the king and conveyed the Muni Gavijat's curse. Now the countdown had begun. The king called his trusted ministers and said, A Brahmin has cursed me and I am at fault. It is inevitable that the curse will have effect. But think of some way out. Those who are versed in the Vedas say that even when death is imminent, all methods to avoid it should be tried. They recommend the use of gems, mantras and medicines. Many years ago, a Muni's wife was struck by a snake and she died. The Muni used an ancient mantra and revived his wife by forfeiting half his life. With this example, you can also try various means to neutralize the curse. But if, after all efforts, death cannot be avoided, then knowledgeable elders have said it is fated to be so. The ministers asked, Maharaj, who was that Muni who gave up half his life to save his wife? How did his wife die? Please tell us about this incident. King Parikshit said, Paloma was the beautiful wife of Bhrigu. She gave birth to Muni Chyavan. Chyavan married Sukanya, daughter of King Sharyati. She was the mother of the famous king Shriman Pramati. He married Pratapi and they had a son called Ruru, who became a great tapasvi, dharmatma and an honest and truth-loving sage. One day, the beautiful Apsara from Indra's court, Menaka, was bathing in a river. A Muni called Vishwavasu became overcome with admiration for her. She withdrew to a place near the ashram of Sthulkesh Muni and gave birth to a girl child. Seeing this beautiful child abandoned on the banks of the river, Sthulkesh Muni took her to his ashram and made her his daughter and named her Pramdvara. She grew into a beautiful and accomplished maiden and had all pleasing manners and disposition. Muni Ruru saw this beautiful maiden in sage Sthulkesh's ashram. Chapter 2, Episode 9-10. Ruru surrenders half his life for Pramdvara. Sage Kashyap accepts money from Takshak. Death of Parikshit. Parikshit says, Muni Ruru got enchanted with Pramdvara. He went home and lay down. When his father saw that he was distracted and distraught, he asked him the reason. He said to his father, There is a maiden named Pramdvara in sage Sthulkesh's ashram. I wish to marry her. Muni Pramati went immediately to sage Sthulkesh and persuaded him to agree to the marriage of Pramdwara with Ruru. They selected an auspicious date and started making all arrangements for the marriage. One day, during that time, Pramdwara was wandering in the courtyard of the ashram. A snake was basking in the sun and she accidentally stepped on it. No sooner her foot touched it, the snake struck her and put its venom into her. She fell down, lifeless. Everyone was plunged into grief and despair. There was great confusion because all the munis began to arrive from surrounding areas. The father was inconsolable and Ruru sank into deep sorrow. Pramdwara was such a chaste and holy maiden that even in death her face was radiant and she looked as if she was asleep. All the sages went into consultation. Ruru ran outside to give vent to his sorrow. He felt that it was his misfortune that brought the fateful snake into the ashram to bite the maiden. The joy of marrying Pramdwara had been snatched from him and there was no reason for him to continue living. He sat on the bank of the river and contemplated suicide. But then he thought, if I take my own life, the only fruit of my action will be that I will always be accused of committing suicide. My father will be sad and my mother will not be able to bear my death. Only bad luck will enjoy my fate. My death will not benefit Pramdwara in any way. There will be more harm done than good. If I stay alive, no one will be adversely affected. He got up, took a bath, purified himself, and took water in both his hands. Then he declared, if I have worshipped God, if I have done just deeds, if I honored my Guru, if I have uttered prescribed mantras and prayers, if I have meditated, if I have performed havans and sacrifices, if I have recited the holy Gayatri mantra and done Surya Namaskara, if these have been acceptable to God, then let my Pramdwara come back to life. If not, I will give up my life. Saying this with complete worship and surrender, he poured the water onto the earth. He had just completed this when a messenger from God appeared before him. The messenger said, O Brahmin, you must not grieve thus for a deceased wife. How can a dead maiden come to life? She was the daughter of the Apsara Menaka and her lifespan is spent. She died before getting married. You find another partner and marry her. What feelings can you have for a dead girl now? Ruru said, O divine messenger, whether she is alive or dead, it is now my decision that I will not marry anyone else. I will die. Seeing this devotion, the Devdut was very pleased. He offered him a most pleasing and acceptable proposal. He said, I will tell you a strategy that the gods used in ancient times. If you give up half of your lifespan, you can get back the life of Pramdwara. Ruru said, this very moment I am prepared to give up half of my life. I desire that my dear Pramdwara should get life and sit up. Just then, Muni Vishwavasu arrived on his Vahana vehicle. He was the king of the Gandharvas. He had heard of the death of his daughter Pramdwara and he came down from the heavens. Both Vishwavasu and the divine messenger went to Dharmraj, Yama, god of death, and said, O Deva, this maiden who has just died is the daughter of Vishwavasu and is the betrothed of Muni Ruru. She died of snake bite. Ruru is prepared to give half his life in exchange for hers. We pray you to accept this and give life back to Pramdwara. He also surrenders the fruits of all his pious prayers and actions. Dharmraj said, Devdut, as desired, you may go to Ruru and in exchange for half his life, Pramdwara can be brought to life again. Raja Parikshit says, the divine messenger went to Ruru and gave him back Pramdwara. After that, on an auspicious date and time, the marriage was performed according to prescribed rites. Thus, by using all the means available, even a dead girl could be brought back to life. It is prescribed in the Shastras that all means should be used, gemstones, mantras, medicines to preserve life. After this, Raja Parikshit handed over the running of his kingdom to trusted and capable ministers and built a 7-storied mansion. He took his ministers with him and went to live in the uppermost floor. For his protection, he called the learned men versed in the knowledge of mantras and gemstones. Then he called for Muni Gaurmukh. He sent him to the Muni Gavijat, who had cursed him, to appease the Muni by saying again and again, "Parikshit is your servant, please forgive him." To further ensure his safety, Parikshit called priests in addition to his ministers. The guards were all young and strong, and many elephants stood in front of the gate. The arrangements were so secure that no living thing could enter unnoticed. Even the wind was restricted. The king ate and drank and even bathed on the uppermost floor. A well-known Brahmin, Kashyap, heard that the king was under a curse to die of snake bite. He was eager to earn some wealth. He decided to go to the mansion where the king was now living. He was very learned in the use of mantras, but he was greedy for money. Sutji says, the curse was already known to Takshak, one of the 8 serpents of the netherworld. The day Kashyap began his journey to the king, Takshak disguised himself as a young man and also started towards the king's mansion. On the way, he met Kashyap. He asked him, "Maharaj, where are you going with such determination and speed?" Kashyap replied, "A serpent is going to bite King Parikshit. I am going there to remove the venom and its fire from his body. I know the mantra for neutralizing venom. If the king still has a lifespan, I can certainly revive him." Takshak said, "Brahmin, I am that very Takshak, and I am going to consume him with the fire of my venom. You better return to your house. There is no cure for my venom." Kashyap said, "Serpent, the Brahmin has cursed the king, so it is inevitable that you will definitely bite him. But my mantra has the power to give him back the balance of his lifespan." Takshak said, "Brahmin, you are a holy soul. Before you try your cure on the king, show me your powers. I will put my poisonous fangs into that banyan tree." Kashyap said, "I can revive it to its former greener state." Sutji says, Takshak bit the tree and the venom reduced it to ashes. Then he asked the Brahmin to revive it. The Brahmin collected all the ashes. Then he said to Takshak, "O serpent who spews venom, now see how I revive the tree." Saying this, he took a handful of water, chanted a mantra, and sprinkled it over the ashes. As soon as the drops of water touched it, the tree was restored to its former green, leafy state. Takshak was astonished to see this. He asked the Brahmin, "Why are you taking so much trouble? Whatever you are expecting in return, tell me and I will give that to you." Kashyap said, "I am in need of wealth. If I revive the king, he will definitely reward me. Thinking of this, I am making my way to the king." Takshak said, "O twice born, I will give you whatever amount you were hoping to get from the king. Take it and go back to your house. In this way, I also can accomplish my duty." Sutji says, being aware of the importance of truthfulness, the Brahmin began to ponder over what Takshak said about doing one's duty. He thought, "If I take the money and go home, the world will condemn me as avaricious. If I revive the king, I will get a reward and also name and fame. I will also reap the blessings that one gets on saving the life of another. Honor should always be preserved. Without honor, wealth is held in contempt." Raghu, an ancient king of the Sun dynasty and forefather of Sri Rama, gave away all his wealth to Brahmins for the sake of honor. In the same way, for the sake of honor, King Harishchandra and Karan became poor and destitute. Therefore, if King Parikshit burns from the venom of the serpent, how can I neglect him? If I save the king, all his subjects can live peacefully and happily. Because without a king, the kingdom faces destruction. If the king dies, his death will be a sin on my conscience. I will be scorned as a greedy man. After giving due consideration to all aspects, Kashyap went into a meditative state. He was astonished to discover that King Parikshit's lifespan had come to its end. So he took the money from Takshak and went home. After convincing Kashyap to go back to his house, Takshak waited for 7 days. Then he took the road to Hastinapur to carry out his task of killing King Parikshit. In the farthest part of his kingdom and in the highest point of his mansion sat the king, surrounded by his ministers and priests. Very strict security arrangements had been made. Takshak became anxious. He thought, if I do not succeed in injecting my venom into the king, the Muni will certainly curse me. This frightened him. He went into deep contemplation to find a way to enter the mansion. He thought, the king has been cursed by a Brahmin. He was foolish enough to dishonor a Brahmin and incur his wrath. In the lineage of King Pandu, there has never been a king so vicious as to place a dead snake around the neck of a meditating tapasvi. Knowing that the time for retribution has come, he has made such elaborate arrangements for his safety. He is trying to elude and dodge death. I have to find a way to fulfill the directive of the Muni. Death does not wait. This foolish king seems to be unaware of the fact. Fate is very powerful. If he is fated to die, then even 1 crore precautions cannot prevent it. In spite of knowing that he has become the prey, he is still making plans to live. That is why he is sitting atop this high building. The duty of a king is to give alms and do charitable works. He not only gets blessings, but he also gets a longer lease of life. In case the lifespan is not increased and death is imminent, then if one does cleansing, charity and other pious acts, then the soul leaves the body, it directly goes to heaven. Otherwise, it languishes in hell. This king has already committed the great sin of tormenting an ascetic in meditation. To incur such a horrible curse is the worst thing that could happen. There appears to be no Brahmin among his priests who can explain to him that a curse of death from a Brahmin is irreversible and inevitable. After thinking all these things, Takshak disguised all his serpent companions as ascetics and sent them to the king. They carried fruits and flowers. Takshak turned himself into a tiny worm and got into a fruit. Then he became impatient to go and complete the job. The disguised serpents started their journey. They were stopped at the gates by the guards who asked the purpose of their visit. They replied, "We are ascetics and have come from Tapovan, that is sacred grove, to pay our respects to the King Parikshit, son of Abhimanyu. He is the rising sun of the clan. His form is radiant and most pleasing. We have come to chant mantras from the Atharvana Veda, which will ensure his long life. Kindly inform the king that we will perform Abhishek, sprinkling of water, offer fruits and leave. We have visited many kings in this land and have never been turned away by the palace guards. We wish to go to the king personally and confer our blessings on him." Sutji says, believing them to be Brahmins, the guards repeated to them the king's orders. "We are not allowed to permit anyone to see the king today. We request you to come tomorrow. The king has been cursed with death and he is afraid to meet anyone today." The ascetics said, "These flowers, fruits and water are all blessings from us. At least send these to the king." The guards went to the king and gave him the message of the ascetics. The king asked them to bring the offerings of flowers, fruits and water and to request the ascetics to come the next day in the morning. He asked them to convey his respects. The guards went down, conveyed the message to the ascetics and respectfully accepted the flowers and fruits. These were presented before the king. The serpents disguised as ascetics left. The king asked the ministers to eat the fruits and he also picked one for himself. When he cut the fruit, he saw a little worm in it. It had black eyes and a red body. When the sun began to set, the king exclaimed, "Now I have no fear. The sun is about to set. I will honor the Muni's curse. May this little worm bite me." Saying this, he placed the worm on his neck. As the sun went down, the worm changed into a serpent Takshak of the most fearful form. The king came face to face with his destroyer. The serpent sank his poisonous fangs into the king's neck. The ministers were astounded. They were paralyzed with fear at the sight of a huge serpent. Then they began to run here and there. The guards were shouting, and there was chaos everywhere. When the king was faced with the serpent's hood, he lost all his courage and strength. He could neither cry out nor could he move. The serpent sank his fangs into the king, and the venom pervaded his body. The king died instantly. The serpent completed his task and returned to the heavens. All the subjects began to grieve for their king. Chapter 2, Episode 11-12. Coronation of Janmejay, Sarpa Yagya, that is serpent sacrifice, on the request of sage Uttank, birth of Astik. Suji says, after King Parikshit died, seeing that his son Janmejay was still a child, the ministers performed all the funeral rites. A pyre was built of aguru and other fragrant wood on the banks of the Ganga. The already burned body of King Parikshit was placed on this and the pyre was lit. Alms were distributed to Brahmins in the form of cows, gold, grain and different kinds of cloth. The prince was very young, but the subjects were very pleased with him. Therefore, selecting an auspicious date and time, he was installed on the throne. He was possessed of all kingly qualities of head and heart. His foster mother had instilled all the good qualities which a king should possess. When he reached the age of 11, learned sages began his spiritual education. He was very intelligent and quick to learn. Then Guru Kripacharya taught him the skills of archery, just as Arjuna was taught by Guru Dronacharya and Karan was taught by Parshuramji. He became illustrious and valiant. He even pursued spiritual knowledge and understood its subtle truths. He could give discourses on the scriptures. He never spoke an untruth. He had his senses under his control. He ruled his kingdom in the style of Yudhishthira. He married Vipushtma, daughter of the king of Kashi, Suvarnavarmak. He was happy and ruled justly. At that time, there lived an ascetic named Uttank. He had been tormented by the serpent Takshak. For this past misdeed, he wanted to punish him, and with this in mind, he went to Hastinapura. He wanted to use Janmejay to wreak revenge on Takshak. When he reached Hastinapur, he went to King Janmejay and said, Rajendra, you do not seem to have the knowledge of what should be done and when. That is why all improper deeds are being sanctioned by you and the prescribed and proper things are being disregarded and neglected. What can I say? You are so busy and involved in your royal duties that you have become insensitive. You do not recognize your enemies and you do not know how to retaliate. You are only engrossed in your routine activities. Janmejaya asked, who is the enemy that I have not recognized or avenged? Please tell me clearly. As soon as I know, I will take the necessary action. Uttank replied, King, Takshak is a great villain. He killed your father. Call your ministers and ask them the cause of your father's death. Suji says, Janmejay called for his chief ministers and asked them. They replied, Because of a Brahmin's curse, Takshak bit your father and he died. Janmejay wisely said, Then it is clear that if a Brahmin cursed him, the cause of death was the curse. Then tell me, O Muni, what is the fault of Takshak? Uttank said, A Brahmin versed in the art of removing venom was on his way to the mansion where your father had taken refuge. Takshak would have bitten your father, and the Brahmin would have used his skills and brought him back to life. But Takshak gave him wealth and sent him away. That is why your father died. Therefore, it is clear that Takshak is responsible for your father's death. O king, in ancient times, Muni Ruru's wife was bitten by a snake and she died. Duru was able to bring her back to life, but he vowed that he would kill any snake that he saw in future. He took a weapon in his hand and began to roam the earth looking for snakes. One day, he came upon an aged python sitting in the forest. Duru took his weapon and began beating the snake. It said, I have not done any harm to you, then why are you beating me? Ruru replied, A snake had bitten my dearly beloved wife and she died. In a fit of anger and grief, I had made a vow to kill any snake I saw. The snake said, I do not bite. The snakes that bite are of a different species. Only our bodies are the same, so it is not proper for you to kill me. Uttank said. The snake was speaking in a human voice, so Ruru asked him, Who are you and why were you born as a snake? The python replied, Long ago I was a Brahmin. I had a very close friend who was widely known as Khihar. He was very righteous, pious and learned. One day, I mischievously made a snake out of grass and deceived him. He was performing a havan, and when he saw the snake, he was terrified. He was trembling with fear. When he discovered the truth, he cursed me. O foolish one, you tried to frighten me with a snake. Now you become a snake. After a lot of effort, I was able to appease his anger. He reduced the tenure of the curse, saying, Muni Ruru will release you from that curse. I am that very snake and you are Ruru, but listen carefully. It is the dharma of a Brahmin to be non-violent. There is no doubt about this. A Brahmin must always be compassionate. Uttank said, That snake was a Brahmin in his previous birth. After Ruru killed him, he got his release. After that, Ruru never killed another snake. He revived his betrothed and married her. Ruru took the necessary revenge for a heinous deed, but you are indifferent and have forgotten your enmity towards snakes. You are a famous king. You should vent your anger against the killer of your father. His soul is wandering here and there. It is advisable for you to kill all snakes and avenge your father's death. A son who does not take action against the killer of his father is as good as death. Until you kill all the snakes, your father's soul will not get salvation. It is now your duty to perform the Amba Yagya. In remembering your father, snakes will be offered in the Havan. Suji says, Hearing Uttank's words, the king's eyes filled with tears. He said, I am so foolish. I am ashamed. I was very conceited and I considered myself to be clever. Because of me, the snake bit my father and he has still not got his salvation. I will now perform the yagya in retaliation. Really, it is necessary to consign all serpents to the blazing fire. Then I will not feel guilty. Then King Janmejay called his ministers and said, Ministers, make arrangements for all samagri, ingredients for the yagya. Call all learned Brahmins and tell them to find an auspicious spot on the banks of the holy river Ganga. Carefully build a mandap, that is, canopy, with 100 pillars. It is very important to conform to all specifications enjoined in the Vedas. We are going to perform a comprehensive snake sacrifice. Takshak will be the main sacrificial animal. Muni Uttank will be the chief priest. Please make all arrangements in the prescribed manner and invite all learned Brahmins. Surji says, the king's ministers were very efficient. All arrangements were completed perfectly. The yagya started and snakes were offered to the fire. Takshak ran away to Indra to seek refuge. He said, "O Prabhu, I got frightened and ran away. Please protect me." Indra assured him of safety and made him sit near his throne. He then bestowed courage on him and said, "Snake, become fearless." Uttan became aware of Takshak's flight to Indra and the boon of courage that Indra had given him. He was agitated. Then he called for Takshak along with Indradeva. Takshak called to mind the powerful and pious saint Astik, born of the Yayavar clan. He was the son of Muni Jaratkaru. Muni Astik came to Janmejaya and pleaded with him. Muni Astik was a radiant being and well known as a learned sage. King Janmejaya received him with the proper formalities and inquired the purpose of his visit. Then sage Astik said, "O fortunate one, you discontinue this yagya." Janmejaya said he was under promise, but the Muni repeated his request. Then of course, out of respect for the great Muni, the king ended the yagya. Afterwards, sage Vaishampayan, who was a student of Vedavyas, began to narrate the Mahabharata to King Janmejaya. But after listening to the entire narration, the king was not at peace. Then he asked Vedavyas, "What must I do to get peace in my attention? I am burning inside. Please tell me what I must do. Only bad luck seems to be in my fate. That is why my father, who was the grandson of Arjuna, met with such a horrible death. O most auspicious Vyasji, for a Kshatriya it is most desirable to die on a battlefield. But whether on the battlefield or in the house, one must die with dignity. My father was deprived of both. His soul must be wandering. O son of Satyavati, please advise me what I should do to ensure that my father's soul is permitted to enter heaven." Suji says, Vedavyas addressed the king in front of all those present. Vyasji said, "I am going to tell you about the most pure and sacred of Puranas, the Srimad Devi Bhagavat. Many historical incidents are recorded here. I first recited it to my son Sukadev. Now I am narrating it to you. It is most secret and not to be told to all. He who listens to it with devotion is rewarded with dharma, wealth and moksha, release from the cycle of rebirths. It is most auspicious and blessed and filled with the essence of the Vedas." Janmejaya asked, "Please tell me whose son Astik was and why he prevented completion of the yagya. By protecting the snakes, what did he achieve? You observed the highest renunciation. Be kind and tell me all this in detail, and also please narrate the most holy Puran." Vyasji continued, "There was a Muni called Jaratkaru. He was very compassionate. He did not enter Grihasthashram, the married state. He was roaming in the forest one day when he saw his ancestors hanging in a cave. They spoke to him, 'Son, you get married so that we can be gratified. It is only your sons who can be the cause of our attaining heaven.' Jaratkaru said, 'O forefathers, if I can get without asking a maiden with an identical name and who will be perpetually obedient and submissive, I will marry.' Then he went on a journey to all the holy places. At about that time, a mother snake had cursed her children. 'All of you fall into the fire.' The story is like this. Muni Kashyap had two wives, Kadru and Vinta. They spotted Surya riding a chariot with splendid horses. Both of them began to argue about the color of the horses. Kadru asked Vinta, "Can you tell immediately what color the horses are? There should be no delay." Vinta replied, "Those beautiful horses are definitely white. What do you think?" Then we can make a wager that if I lose, I will become your maid, and if you lose, you will become mine. Suji says, at that time, Kadru had a great number of small black baby snakes. She said to those children of hers, go and cover the entire bodies of those horses so that they appear black. Some of the baby snakes disobeyed, so she cursed them. The yagya of King Janmejay will be blazing brightly, and all of you will fall into it and turn into ashes. The ones that obeyed went and covered the bodies of the horses so that they appeared to be black. The two sisters, Kadru and Vinta, went to inspect the horses. When Vinta saw that they were black, her heart sank. Just then, Vinta's son Garuda came. He was very strong and brave. He used to swallow snakes. He asked his mother, why are you so sad? It seems to be that you are weeping. Both your sons, namely me and Surya's charioteer Arun, are alive and well. While we exist, you cannot be sad, otherwise our birth is wasted. Of what use is a son if he cannot remove his mother's sorrows? O mother, tell me the cause of your distress and I will immediately defeat it. Vinta said, son, I have become the maidservant of my co-partner. Such a misfortune has befallen me. She now orders me to carry her on my shoulders. This is the reason I am so unhappy. Garud said, mother, I will take her to her destination. Do not worry. I will remove all your troubles. Vyasji said, Vinta went to Kadru and Garud also accomplished her in order to get his mother released from the wager. He took Kadru and her children on his back and flew across the river. He then said to Kadru, Mother, I salute you. Please tell me how I can free my mother from being your servant. Kadru said, if you go to heaven and bring the strength-giving nectar and give it to my sons, your mother will be free to go. Garud, king of birds, immediately flew to Indralok, heaven. He fought a battle and snatched away the pot containing the nectar. He brought and gave it to Kadru. In this way, Vinta got her freedom. When the snakes, sons of Kadru, went to bathe, Indra came and stole the pot of nectar. When the snakes came back, there was a carpet of kusha grass. They began to lick it. The blades of grass were very sharp and their tongues split in two. The serpents, who had been cursed by their mother Kadru, went to Sri Brahma for refuge. They told him of the curse and how they are afraid of dying in the yagya. Sri Brahmaji said, Vasuki, second of the 8 prominent Nagas, there is a famous sage called Jaratkaru. You have a sister with an identical name. Give her in marriage to the sage. The child that is born to her will protect you. His name will be Astik. Hearing Sri Brahma's auspicious words, Vasuki went to the forest and offered his sister in marriage to Jaratkaru. The girl's name was also Jaratkaru. The Muni said, she has the identical name, so I will marry her. But the moment she does anything against my wishes, I will leave her. After saying this, the Muni married her and Vasuki returned to his house. Muni Jaratkaru built a dwelling and lived with his wife. One day, after eating his food, the Muni prepared to sleep. He said to his wife, no matter what happens, do not wake me up. Saying this, he surrendered himself to the power of Nidra Devi, goddess who resides in all beings in the form of sleep. When the sun began to move towards Astachalpur, a certain mountain in the west, behind which the sun is supposed to set, and dusk began to settle, the Muni was still asleep. His wife Jaratkaru began to worry that he would miss the evening prayers. She was in an uncertain state of mind. She thought, if I disobey him and wake him, he will discard me. But if I do not, I will be the cause of his missing his evening duties of prayer and worship, Sandhya. In the balance, I would choose to prevent him from neglecting his spiritual duties. Death is inevitable. The man who breaks his dharmas has to suffer hell again and again. She made her decision and woke up the Muni. His sleep was disturbed and he woke up saying, "You have caused a disturbance in my sleep. I am leaving. You go to your brother's house." When he said this, his wife Jaradkaru's body began to tremble with distress. She said, "O radiant and pious Lord, if you send me away, how can I fulfill the purpose for which my brothers gave me to you?" Then the Muni calmed down and said, "Yes, that is so." Jaradkaru left and went to her brother Vasuki's house. When her brother questioned her, she said, "When I pleaded with my husband, he just said, 'Asthiti, so it will be,' and left." Hearing this, Vasuki became confident. He knew Muni Jaradkaru was an honest and truthful man, and his words will not go fruitless. He kept his sister in his house. After some time, she gave birth to a son best in the noble line of Kuru. It is this child who became the famous sage Astik. "O king, this is the Muni who came and saved the snakes from your yagya. This is the shining light of the Yaya dynasty. His deeds are most praiseworthy, and you also have honored him. O strong-limbed one, be at peace. Now, with great devotion, build a beautiful temple for Bhagavati Jagadambika and reap the benefits of success in all your endeavors. If you worship her with utmost bhakti, she fulfills all your desires. Your clan will progress in growth and prosperity, and your kingdom will never falter. O king, observe the austerities of Navaratri. Listen to the readings of Srimad Devi Bhagavat. I will narrate it to you. This rare and divine Puran frees one from worldly shackles and is filled with the essence of truth and divine power. King, the person in whose pure and loving attention Bhagavati enthrones herself, that person is blessed and elevated in spirit. They are counted among the most fortunate. O King of Bharat, the persons who do not recognize and worship Mahamaya Bhagavati Jagadambika, they are unfortunate, unlucky, and suffer great tribulations. When all the gods, from Brahma downwards, are constantly in meditation on her lotus feet, which being is there who can avoid worshipping her and still be happy and peaceful? Whoever listens continuously to the narration of this Puran, all his dearest and purest desires are fulfilled. This most important and most auspicious Puran was first uttered as a half shlok for Sri Vishnu. O King, it is only by listening to this Puran with full attention and devotion that you will attain mental peace, and your forefathers will receive the blessings of a place in heaven. End of chapter 2.
The Holy Recital of Srimad Devi Bhagavat.
Jai Shri Mataji.